IAS Academy's another episode of podcast. Our guest for today is Shri Jalaj sir. He is a retired Indian Administrative Officer of ACMO Cadre 1984 batch. Let's hear more insights from our guest today. Welcome to Shankar IAS Academy, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's go on with our questions for today.
Please.
To start off your career effectively bridges a massive historical evolution in how Indian administrative functions. Younger civil aspirants today only know an era where the executive and judiciary operates with strict separate boundaries. But when you were posted in Arunachal Pradesh, you actually served in an era where substantial judicial and magisterial powers were actively vested within the IAS. What was it like executing both the lawmaking administration and real judicial powers on the ground? And do you feel the subsequent separation of powers stripped away a vital tool for quick grassroots conflict resolution?
Okay. If I have understood the question, there was a time when in quite a few places in our country, a separate judicial system was not in place, especially in areas such as the Northeast. Quite a few states had the district magistrate and his juniors also exercising judicial power. So at the age of 26, yours truly was also a district and session judge, and I was a district magistrate called deputy commissioner over there, which is actually a very enabling thing. If you see, it cut through a lot of time, a lot of energy. The decision making process became much faster. Of course, we all go through in the academy basic knowledge of law and procedure and so on, CRPC, IPC, and Evidence Act as they then were. But you see, we did not have in the Northeast. I was in Arunachal Pradesh from 86 to 91, and prior to that, for a year in Assam. Now we all go through an executive magistracy powers, and we were during training given JMFC powers also. But this is something very unique now, not anymore, alas. In the Arunachal Pradesh also and so many other states, there is a separate judicial system. Now, how it helps is that, you see, we used to have in 1 month 2 or 3 lawyers coming from, say, Dibrugarh, Jorhat bench, the district courts, and they would argue a bunch of cases, and we would divide them. Within that 1 week, we could sort out a lot of disputes in a very informal. I mean, the court is sitting, but you don't have to keep carrying on and on. And the best part about the Tariq pe Tariq culture was, the best part of this system was that we said no such Tariq pe Tariq nahi hota hai. So there was a lot of expeditious yet diligent handling and disposal of cases. So you can imagine that at the sessions level, my peers and my batchmates and so on, they were able to dispose of sessions level cases in a few months, which usually take years and years in the judiciary. Now I'm not trying to pull down the judiciary, I'm just saying that in such areas, especially in the Northeast, you have a very strong local tribal laws set up, and technically even murder cases can be tried with them by them. And now we have come through this BNS system of delivering justice and not necessarily punishment. In the traditional tribal system, they always had this delivery of justice and not necessarily punishment. Even a murder convict I mean from the local tribal laws, he was supposed to not touch a sharp weapon for several years, and then he was supposed to live alone in the jungles, and once in a week somebody would come and give him some food which he was supposed to cook himself somehow. So in a way that is solitary, and it is much more difficult to live like that, even if it's a 2-year sentence. But the short point is that a person emerges with a lot of non-violence in him, And so I think it's a learning process. One did not just learn about exercise of brute judicial powers and with a heavy hand. One learned humility from the local tribal systems also. I think that's why it was a very enriching experience to exercise judicial powers. And I hope people agree with me.
Yes, sir. As an IAS officer of 1984 batch, let us understand. Let's go back again. So, I think it's via through regular recruitment stream. You've bridged two distinct eras of administration. Right?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So, what is the most radical shift you've observed in how a civil servant handles institutional accountability today compared to the pre-realization?
See, 84 was the time when typewriters were giving way to word processors. But computers had not really come in till Rajiv ji, really late Rajiv ji, late Prime Minister stepped in and brought in this revolution. And so we were of that generation when learning computer skills was not really compulsory. But those who had the foresight, they developed these faculties rather early and rather aggressively. Some of my batchmates, for example, Shri Durga Shankar Mishra, he was called Computer Baba. I mean, he was so fond of his computer literacy and education. He was way ahead of others, and I'm sure so many engineering graduates, etc. So it was a technological watershed moment when people who were relying on experience and on file note sheet kind of knowledge, and suddenly you came across with an enabling tool which was much faster in getting you information and so on. Gradually I also learned we all had to, but that was not just it was not just a shift in computer literacy. The point is that era was marked by the shift from the 50s and 60s bureaucrat to the 1970s bureaucrat. A little previously, of course, you were only looking after addressing the poverty and hunger issues, and some industrialization issues came up in 1970s. The 70s era was hugely about defense also, and you know why. The emergency era and the aftermath. So you had all sorts of legal, constitutional, strategy, security issues going on in the country. But the 80s had a welfare and systemic rural development as its theme. So the people's shift from the British era officers to the 50s, 60s Indian bureaucrat suddenly became 1980s to DRDA and IRDP and all these food for work programs and so on. So it was a massive shift towards the rural sector, and some of it, of course, constitutional amendments came in, and you introduced eventually the Panchayat Raj system in the later part of 80s and 90s. And municipal and panchayat between themselves, they, I think, addressed a lot of grassroots level welfare. So I think the bureaucrat decidedly shifted from a certain mindset to addressing the grassroots level welfare as his core purpose.
Nice. Shifting across the vast territorial spectrum of Agmukara, from highly sensitive resource border states to dense urban setups, how must an administrator pivot their mental model when switching from basic survival governance to complex city statecraft?
You see, Agmut Karga, firstly, all of you must understand, there is nothing normal about Agmut Karga or any of its territories. Every territory is by definition sensitive. Right? Delhi has its own sensitivity. People wanted to make it into a state in the 50s and soon wisened up to the idea that no, you should not make it into a state. Whichever party comes to power. How many ever unanimous resolutions in whichever assembly can happen. There is a wisdom against it. So why is it that Delhi cannot be a state? Why is it that Pondicherry or something cannot be a state? Why is it that Andamans could not be, being a very important unit? Why would it not just be merged with West Bengal? Now today you realize why it should not have been mixed.
Certainly, yes.
So these are the kinds of sensitivities. I'm not spelling out because unnecessarily political is not what this discussion is going to be. Same thing with Lakshadweep. I mean, people tell us that had we not utilized those 40 minutes properly, Lakshadweep would have been in Pakistan. Well, Karachi ships had come in and Sardar Patel had taken that step, and therefore we landed in Lakshadweep and we hoisted our flag. So, by definition, such territories, Chandigarh, all right, we are received. Ladakh and J&K are another reason. Manipur, Tripura had been union territories, but given a certain political status, it went back. Arunachal and Mizoram again, although we are still addressing that, and Goa as cadre officers. So my point is that every union territory, you may consider it transient as a phase, but certainly each UT has its own sensitivity, and no two union territories are similar. I'll give you an example. The Mandarins in the Home Ministry, I had the good fortune to be serving in the Home Ministry in the UT desk, when people were not aware of the armed cadre, including my bosses. They would simply say, "Acha, isko Arunachal bhej do, usko Mizoram bhej do, both are in the northeast." What the hell? Not realizing that Mizoram, for example, is 70% of the importance is of the Aizawl area, and the rest of the officers can be posted. It's very heavily capital centric. Arunachal Pradesh is, on the other hand, extremely diversified in that sense. The district is the most important unit. Ab pata nahi, in my time there were 11 districts and 2 subdivisions and so on, independent subdivisions. Now probably there are 18, 19, 20, I haven't kept track. But point is, if the districts are being governed properly, then Itanagar gets governed automatically well. So the then Chief Minister Sahab, Devanupandi, whom I respect a lot, he used to post the brightest of officers to the districts first. I don't know why he posted me, but the brightest used to go to the districts. And then his second priority was, oh yeah, state capital mein to hum kar hi lenge. So even Arunachal and Mizoram have a different way of which officer should be sent where. It's important. If you send an officer to Mizoram and he's posted not to the capital, and if he's a brilliant officer, not a routine officer, then you're wasting him, right? And if you are taking a brilliant officer, a not so brilliant officer, or somebody who has all sorts of angularities, and you post him in Arunachal, say in Tawang or in Khonsa or in Hanini or Tezu, which require a very solid officer, then you are going to have complaints in that office. So that is why Agmut cadre is sensitive by and large. Goa is probably the only place which is not sensitive.
Sir, having said that, you have spent over 4 substantial years in Delhi State Industrial and Infrastructure Development Corporation. That's also DSIIDC. May I know why it is DSIIDC than DSIDC?
You see, Delhi's uniqueness being what it is, limited area, burgeoning population. There was a time when Nehruji's era, when you had to have some employment generation in every house. So there were a lot of household level units coming up and so on. So all of Delhi was in a way small little industries, home run industries, basement or garage run industries and so on. So eventually it became industrial development as in every other state. So industrial estates were there. But there was a limit to which you could expand on the industry side. So the government kept on giving DSIDC, and I should say I was very aggressive. My team was extremely aggressive about कि हमें अपना we have to keep increasing our turnover. So I went and took up school construction, hospital construction, road construction, unauthorized colonies, maybe you had to give water and electricity connections on. I took up every possible work you can think of, including sending workers to the Gulf. That was also one of our things. Selling liquor, of course, was, in which I pride myself a lot, on which. Similarly, there were so many things which were happening, not strictly on industry side, but on infrastructure side. So I went ahead and suggested to my Chief Secretary Saab, that's Mr. Diana Swami, who continues to rib me on this, that you have got the other eye now. We were one-eyed till today. So we got this tag of infrastructure, industry and infrastructure. It took me quite a lot of hard work for almost a year to get the second tag. But infrastructure is what we were.
That was dealt during your tenure.
Yes. I started the issue and was fortunate to get that tag. So we became a two-eyed corporation.
But the actual question is not so. So I'm coming back to the same question. In a complex administrative layout like Delhi, as you already mentioned, multiple power structures and jurisdiction overlaps. Yeah. So how did you maintain this rapid growth without getting caught in the regulatory blocks?
Okay, it goes like this. As I said, there was a time when employment generation from every house was the emphasis, and that was how it was being encouraged by the governments of the day. Eventually, all this environment and traffic and Shri M.C. Mehta's case and so on, all these enjoined the government into taking active steps to close down unauthorizedly running industries. They may have been part of the policy structure earlier, but later on, the purpose was to close down all this. So, M.C. Mehta case, while going on in the higher judiciary, you see, before I joined DSIDC and became Commissioner Industries, contempt had already been committed. So, which is my polite way of saying that my predecessor had committed this contempt. But point is, when I entered this thing, it was very real. The High Court had ordered that all the areas A, B, and C, there were different timelines and so on. The industries from all residential areas shall be closed down, and there should be a report to the court. So the contempt having been committed, yours truly was one day compelled to sit with my late father and my teenage son and tell them कि भाई probably I'll have to go to jail. Contempt तो हो गया है, लेकिन इससे don't worry, नौकरी नहीं जाएगी. So 2-3 महीना I'll come back a little thinner, but don't worry about it. Which is a very difficult conversation to have. But point is, if the institutional gridlock catches an officer, the court is saying something, the government, and I am saying this with all responsibility, the government wants to appear to be following the court orders, but is not giving me 10,000 people who can go from door to door and shut down those industries. So compliance cannot be given. I cannot comply with them physically on the ground. At that time, late Khurana Sahab resigned as governor of Rajasthan on exactly this issue. Late Shri V.P. Singh, our former Prime Minister, he was very active trying to stop this entire thing. There were quite a few very prominent political leaders cutting across party lines, all parties. They were interested in somehow industry should not be closed. So if you don't want the industries to close, why don't you just at least go ahead and fight this in the court. Point is that uh, we could do in the industries department only this much के fine, we will file a compliance report. हमने पहले इतना था इतना कर दिया, but contempt had already been committed, and the only thing we could tell the court is that our intentions are all right. We want to carry out your this thing, but here are the issues. So it has not been a very pleasant ride during those times when you have a very clear direction and the government does not exactly come in to give you all the forces you need.
Moving to our next question. During your time in industry department and the ES-IITC, you frequently dealt with land acquisition, infrastructure development and industrial relocation. When economic imperatives for industrialization directly clash with environmental safeguards, what is your framework for navigating that ethical gray area?
A part of this probably I have explained in the previous question, but quite a few times, for example, the Bhavana township, Bhavana 1, the entire structure happened before I joined. My predecessor should take the credit for it, Mr. R.K. Verma. I stepped in, it was in the later years, and we developed, and the allocation of, for example, low cost housing, cost effective housing, and the allocation of the sheds, 100 meters, and so on. Those plots, they were given during my time. But Bhavana 2, the structure was built during me. The structure as in on the drawing board. So my point is that before any such a scheme comes up in Delhi, due to its proximity to the Supreme Court and a very active media, most of these kabis want their stories to be filed by 4 p.m. so they can go home. So they used to chase every story. So you are in the media limelight all the time. My point is that nothing can happen in Delhi which can actually violate,
The rules.
genuinely, as long as the bona fides are kept, as long as the administration and the government are clear on the bona fides. Almost every kind of expertise is available. You have the building code, land code, environment code, everything. There are always experts who will tell you this is the kind of compliance we have already done, and therefore we can go ahead. So I don't think I have entered on that point into a real grey zone of probably violating, except the case I mentioned earlier, which was completely. So administratively, I don't think. We all take our environmental clearances. For example, now, very recently, a couple of days back, this huge tunnel, Kasam Kunj to Nepal has been announced. It's not an announcement out of thin air. It's been, there's so much of feasibility has been going on for a long time. When everything, all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted, only then the Honorable Minister will go on and announce it. That's how it works.
Okay, see?
For example, I'll give you an example. When Bhavana township came up, during my time there was a lot of letter writing saying that we should have a dedicated metro line to that place. It makes infrastructural sense. It did not make infrastructural sense to Delhi Metro. They said, okay, we want X amount of ridership, and then we will step in and do it. Probably it happens. But I'm talking of 2006, 2007 I left, 20 years back.
20 years.
And still it's not done. So things will happen, but it takes a little longer being Delhi.
As long as Delhi is concerned.
As long as Delhi.
Managing a massive high revenue department like Commissioner of Trade and Taxes demands balancing absolute enforcement with trade facilitation. How can a leadership head curb revenge leakages and tax evasion system gaps without creating an environment of tax terrorism?
That's an interesting question. You see, when it was a sales tax regime, simpliciter, I happened to have met a person who used to pay a certain amount to the sales tax inspector every month. That instead of issuing his tax demand on the first or second of the month, he should issue it on the 28th of the month. So he could save 28 days of interest. So that was the kind of tweaking and business I would say, business smartness which was prevalent in Delhi, and I'm sure elsewhere in the country. But with a high level of computerization, today of course GST is everywhere, and I have a lot of friends who are from the startups or from entrepreneurial class youngsters who tell me that sir, GST se to bada aasan hai. We know exactly what to file. We don't have to keep chasing so many people, so many forms and so on. I'm sure there are issues. I'm sure there is popcorn. You have all those, but exceptions prove the rule, you see. Because the majority of the 85-90% or 95% of things are going okay, therefore ठीक है. You pick on something and you make a meme out of it, or some political controversy out of that, which is fine. It's a part of the thing. But now on the important thing. That department, as it then was, Trade and Taxes Department, the first thing which any officer, any commissioner needs to convince the general public is that he means business, and business does not mean personal business, it is official business. I would like to state on record, 2009, 10, 10, 11, 2 years. The previous year, Lehman Brothers, the whole world was in financial turmoil and so on. Growth, you can't even think of growth. It was probably negative in those years, 2007, 8, 8. 9, 10, I gave it 24% growth. So instead of taking a 200 crore additional target, I took a 2000 crore rupee target and delivered it. That was the strength and beauty of my team, right? And immense government support from the then late Chief Minister, Madam Jalaj Shrivastava, and my former Chief Secretary, my boss, Naina Swami Sahab earlier, and then Mr. P.K. Tripathi, extremely supportive. You see, the point is, that year, and to show that it was not a fluke, next year again I gave them 23.8% of growth by taking a 2000 crore target. It was because, for example, I'll give you a very different kind of. There used to be, for example, 10 teams who would go out for survey, raids, who would come back with, for example, 2 hits and 8 misses. There were actually 24 or something teams. So 20%, 30% was the kind of high they have managed to catch some tax evasion, and 5-6 would say to me, so we reversed this entire thing. I got in touch with the customs people and even with the ED at that time. That okay, give me the list of chronic defaulters. Then we would focus on their businesses. Then I reduced the number of teams who were going out, raiding, by about 1/3, to about 1/3. Which means instead of 24, only 8 teams will go. But out of 8, not 2 but 6 should come back with success, having caught some.
That's how it was executed.
Yes. So the point is that the bulk of people are not troubled, but the focused ones are not going to be spared. The second thing, for example, all the mithai walas, they came to meet me. This was, I had taken over in June and they came to meet me in August. Yes, sir, aisa hai. When the festive season is on October and November, then some team comes in and our 2 hours or 3 hours are wasted. Now you imagine, sir, we have nothing to hide, we'll give you all the books. But 5-6 hours if they take to do the entire operation, and that much time, we lose so many customers. So I said, all right, what is it that you are going to show in those 5-6 hours during October, November, which you can't show in, let's say, December, January, or in March, April? So here is my mobile number. Give them my number. If anybody comes in between 1st of October, or whatever date, and till 30th of November, you take his photo and send it to me, or you make him talk to me. I am issuing instructions that there will be no surveys on sweet shops between 1st October to 30th November. Are you happy? Sir, we are very happy. I said, no. Now I have to be happy.
As well.
Last year you gave me 11% growth. Why and why? This year you give me 15% growth. Sir, ये बहुत ज़्यादा है. So I said okay. So we were haggling. And he said okay. I think we stuck at 14%. You give me 14% growth over what you gave last year. So that's how you get the confidence of the people. I am not. My point is that I did not treat everybody as clerks. I treated them as people who sometimes want to make a quick buck on the side. So you just, and my job is to get the maximum revenue for the government. I'm not here as a saint to cure everybody of his greed for money or power. That's not my job. So in every job there is a different. If I were a CBO, that would be my mandate.
This
right?
is more on the smarter version.
This is a smarter version because I am Commissioner of Trade and Tax and I am not the CVC. I am not the CBO for the government. My job is to give the maximum, and which I did. The Delhi government has not managed to cross 24% even today, 2 years later. So why not?
Yes, sir. Nice to know, very interesting facts.
In fact, one minister of the Delhi government, former minister, is somewhere on record saying that he extracted a lot, he gave a lot of money to the government, but he never troubled anybody because nobody came to us saying that he's been troubled. And in those times I have had some flaps, I have had some quarrels with some very highly placed people. But that's another matter, that's part of the job. But I would like to think that the general public was not troubled in that sense. Even they were not.
Nice, sir. Nice to know. Moving on to the next question, sir. In the fields like industry and tax administration, structural systems are heavily inherited from colonial or pre-reform laws. When a leader takes charge, what are the limits of individual initiative when trying to clean up or modernize a deeply rigid, pre-existing institutional machine?
As I was saying, transitioning from sales tax to VAT, and during my time GST considerations, GST examination of the system, debates on it, GST council meetings. In fact, I was sort of servicing the GST council meetings of all the states. Initial stages in 2008, 9, etc. I still remember a few finance ministers from certain states passed a resolution that GST will not be, we are against it, and they met, they all marched out of the council room and they went to the then finance minister, late Pranab Mukherjee Sahab. And Pranab Mukherjee Sahab, I have never seen him so angry. His face almost became red. He gave them such a scolding, they all scooted back. So, my point is, he was very clear in his mind. The government was very clear
What it has to do.
Once that firmness is given, then the system will always rally around to that. The moment the government shows that it is having two minds or there is a scope for tweaking, then political small fries will come up and they will start creating some
Government should
sort of
affirm, actually.
Right. The government should be clear. First clear and then be firm, that clarity. And after that, every small little politician, every bureaucrat, every advocate,
all is
allowed. And I think even the judiciary, once they see the firmness of the government and very transparently so, they see exactly what the policy paper says. I think judiciary also goes along because once everything is very clearly explained, there is no room for tweaking. The moment a dichotomy comes in or some scope of subjectivity comes in, then people start playing games. So I think that's how the transition issues should always be addressed.
So every now and then there was a lot of interesting facts during your tenure. I mean, you have witnessed many of such things, I suppose.
Quite a few. Some of them will go with me to my last breath, but yes, quite a few interesting episodes have happened.
But you had most of your chiefs being very amendable and very adaptive to all your required?
See, adaptive if it's taken in a positive context, which means yes, but certainly I would like to say that I have kept an open mind about changes, about shifts in policy. If it does not appeal to me, if it appears to me that it is subjectively originating from some subjectivity or some diktat, then I dig my heels in. And there have been several times when I have requested my bosses, sir, post me to another place, I can't pull along with my minister. It has happened. And a few times. There was one time when in a certain assignment, I had only done 1.5 years. So Madam Dikshit ji called me and said, Dekho bhai, wo such and such person, such and such minister, he has written such a letter, 3.5 pages. I said, Madam, I have not damaged him much.
3.5 pages.
3.5 pages. So then I said, Madam, this cannot be his language. The language is that of such and such person who is in my department. So she said, yes, I know that. So I will suggest you keep giving him some respect, please, and otherwise, it's all right. I said, Madam, mujhe hata dijiye. I have no interest in this department. She said, no, nothing doing. Carry on. She kept me in that department for another 2.5, almost 3 years. That was the greatness of that boss, which I had. But my point is that such things which do not appear to be objective, firm, and with clarity, I refuse to accept. Or I should get a very clear reason why I should. So every officer, I think, has scope for not resisting for the head of being, for the sake of being pig-headed, but seeking a clarity and seeking an answer. That I think every officer has sufficient flexibility, sufficient independence, and should have sufficient